Hello everyone, my name is Sam Miller, and this presentation covers my vulnerability assessment project for ISA 4220. For this assignment, I have tried to find and analyze two hidden systems within the given lab environment to identify any weaknesses and determine the overall security vulnerabilities they might provide. The main objective was to assess each host, prioritize the risks, and then recommend corrective action that would strengthen the environment overall. And just a disclaimer, all screenshots provided are from my own work and not to be used in any other projects. So here's what I will be walking through today. I'll start with the purpose and scope of this assessment, followed by the tools and methods used. Next, I'll share the technical results from the scans and explain how vulnerabilities were ranked. After that, I'll discuss both the high and medium findings in detail and move into recommended fixes, and finally close with some verification steps and overall conclusion. The goal of this assessment was to simulate a professional vulnerability review. I wanted to identify potential points of failure or weaknesses and the outdated configurations that could make the specific systems exploitable. So by scanning, analyzing, and interpreting these results, I could determine from that information that I gathered how secure the environment really was and what the steps would most effectively reduce the risk. So ultimately, this process mimics what happens during real-world vulnerability management cycles, which is discover, analyze, remediate, and verify. So in terms of scopes and tools, the project focused on a single subnet, which I have listed there in the PowerPoint. And within the set range that I gave the subnet, I discovered one active hidden Linux host, and I was unable to find the Windows host that was mentioned and confirmed that it wasn't there with my professor. So to perform this assessment, I used Nmap for host discovery and service enumeration, and then I used Greenbone Vulnerability Manager for vulnerability scanning and scoring, and the Kali Linux terminal for validation and log capture. So that's where all the screenshots you'll see in this presentation are from, mostly from my Kali Linux and my Greenbone scan. So all activities were non-intrusive and limited to sandboxed lab network. So after the initial sweep, which you see here, this is a screenshot from my first sweep I did here in the beginning of October. I confirmed that the Linux system was online. It was listening to several ports. The Windows machine never responded to probes, which suggested it was either powered off or just, never there. Nmap helped me confirm that the operating system type and collect service banners, and then I imported that host into Greenbone. So for the full vulnerability scan, I just scanned that specific IP address it was showing, which you can see in the Nmap scans there. Every finding was reviewed and exported into text log, so results could be verified later if needed, and that gave me a complete technical baseline before moving into the analysis. So this is a screenshot of another Nmap scan from my system that I took for the Linux host. The scan revealed multiple open services to the ports, including FTP, SSH, HTTP, Apache Tomcat, and database ports like PostgreSQL. The operating system was fingerprinted as Ubuntu running on a 5.x kernel. So these findings confirmed that the system itself was active, the networks were exposed, and probably likely hosting several legacy applications, which explains why the scans produced so many vulnerabilities, which we'll see in a second. But yeah, the operating system overall just had a lot of outdated services that were running, and that was just creating many, many vulnerability issues. So before I get into the vulnerability issues themselves, I'm going to explain the ranking method used, because you're just going to hear me say high and medium a lot, but let's break that down for a little bit. So to prioritize what mattered most, I used what is called the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, or the CVSS version 3.1. This method calculates a base score from 0 to 10 that reflects how easy a vulnerability is to exploit and how much damage it could cause. Scores of 7 and above are considered high severity, 4 to 6.9 are medium, and anything below a 4 is low. So in this assessment, I focused only on high and medium findings because they represent issues that are both exploitable and impactful. Low severity issues are documented but excluded from the presentation to keep the attention on the actionable risk. So you're not going to see it on the report and you're not going to see it in the PowerPoint, but they were there. But they're just something to keep an eye on and address during routine maintenance. So here's a screenshot for my green-brown scan. The final scan produced 46 total vulnerabilities. Some of the vulnerabilities are repeatable. So I don't know if you can see it from here, but the compromised service packages backdoor vulnerability was listed twice. So I just merged that into one. And there is another vulnerability in the mediums, which is also a repeat, which I just merged into one. I believe it was the TWiki. So I'm just going to speak on a high level and overall, even including the duplicates in this presentation. So 15 of those were high severity issues and 31 were medium. The ratio shows that the system was in critical state and with serious exposure because of the legacy issues. So most of the problems were tied to unpatched services, weak encryption settings, and unsupported software that I found at the end of my assessment and complete research of the project. So by concentrating on high and medium findings, I could provide a more clear picture of the threats that would cause real damage if left unresolved. So the overall assessment for the server is at critical risk. So to speak on the high findings, the severe risk, the high severity findings were the most concerning because they could give an attacker full control of the host. So for example, the VSFTPD 2.3.4 service contained a known backdoor that was allowing remote code execution. Another issue involved TWiki, which had a command ejection vulnerability that could be triggered through crafted URLs, and Apache Tomcat was affected by the GhostCat vulnerability, which allows file access and potential code execution through a GP connector. So each of these vulnerabilities provide a direct path to privilege escalation or persistent compromise. So that's why they were treated as top remediation priority, which is why they are listed in this PowerPoint today. A lot of the vulnerability issues were kind of the same issues from different legacy systems. So these are kind of the most common risks that I found throughout the high vulnerabilities, which is remote code execution, privilege escalation, and full system takeover. The medium severity vulnerabilities were less immediate dangerous, but still very important to fix. They mostly involved outdated encryption protocols and weak configuration choices. That is kind of the summary of all of the medium findings that you will see in my analysis report. So for instance, the TLS 1.0 and 1.1 were still enabled. Weak SSH algorithms like 3DES and MD5 were allowed, and anonymous FTP access was active. Apache also had directory indexing turned on, which can allow exposure to internal file structures to anyone browsing the site. While these issues weren't necessarily lead directly to instant compromise, they can make an environment easier to exploit and reduce the overall security resilience. So again, out of all the 31 vulnerabilities, these were the common issues. So you'll pretty much find kind of a repeat when you see the breakdown in the report itself. So the overall impact from these common issues was that it just enabled brute force attacks or data leakage attacks. So the recommended fixes, once the vulnerabilities were identified, I prioritized mitigation strategies. So for high-risk issues, the fixes included removing SFTPD 2.3.4 and switching to SFTP over SSH, upgrading TWiki, patching Apache Tomcat to a supported version, and applying the latest Open SSH update along with stricter firewall rules. And for the medium severity problems, I recommended enforcing TLS 1.2 or higher, disabling any weak SSH ciphers, turning off any anonymous FTP, and cleaning up the Apache directory indexing to maintain security going forward overall. Most of these issues could have just been completely avoided, if not most of them gone, if there were quarterly vulnerability scans, just consistent patch management documentation, and validating all the configuration changes after the update. So what do these do individually? Again, the quarterly scans just to make sure things are clean on the operating system, maintaining the patch management, making sure that there are no legacy systems running on that can lead to direct exploits, and validation and records are important to keep for auditing purposes to understand what you have done to your system. It's always important to keep a log, knowing what you've done. Don't go in blind. So for verification and future testing, after remediation, verification is essential. We want to make sure the issues that we have found and analyzed, and after we have gone in to fix them, are actually fixed. So I would rerun both Nmap and Greenbone scans to confirm that the vulnerability ports are closed and that the CVEs no longer appear. Patch and configuration logs should be stored for audited purposes and show exactly what changed and when. And finally, compliance should be validated against security policy to ensure the fixes meet standards and remain effective over time. This step closes the loop on the vulnerability management process. So with these 4 steps, all of the issues that I have found throughout my assessment can be mitigated, if not fixed completely. So it's always important to be aware of your security system. It's kind of an important thing to keep in mind that when you are doing cybersecurity related things, the issues you fix is not a one and done. It needs constant review. You have to make sure that things stay secure, so it doesn't just stop with fixing. So to wrap up the assessment overall identified 1 Linux host in critical condition with 46 vulnerabilities in total. 15 were high, 31 were medium severity. The majority of risk came from outdated services and weak configurations that had not been maintained. And so by applying patches, hardening configurations, and maintaining a regular scan schedule, the host security posture can significantly be improved overall. I can easily see even with simple updates, it can drop out of the severity range almost immediately. So continuous monitoring and documentation are key to keeping this secure long term. So all of the findings and technical details were supported by reputable sources. Here are a few which you will find in my report overall. So including NIST CVE's database, the CVSS specification from FIRST, and research from vendors such as Rapid7, TWiki, Trend Micro, and Qtex. These references ensured the accuracy and alignment with industry standards and making sure that I wasn't just pulling this information out of nowhere. All of these links will be linked to the specific PowerPoints where I've mentioned them, and they are referenced in my report. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you all for your time.